I'm bringing back the fight scene art analysis, and what better story to start with than Kagurabachi, a newcomer that illustrates beautiful fight scenes. I'd recommend watching my video on great choreography, because I will be referencing it. The fight starts in chapter 8. For the first attack, Chihiro is shown running in one panel and clashing in the next. The clash panel takes up about a third of the double spread, which is a good amount of space for a big moment. The poses of the characters are good, especially Sojo's. The way he's leaning makes the pose feel more dynamic. Chihiro's fluttering coat and Sojo's dangling hair add to the dynamism due to their dragging. A trick that Hokazono loves to use is the tile floors. By doing this, he can flex his perspective skills. He does that on the floor in this panel, but it isn't very noticeable. The chapter ends with a spread of the two characters powering up and preparing to fight. I really like Chihiro's pose. The empty hand has a nice rhythm to its fingers, and his crossed arms look cool. The way the two characters are paralleled in the panel composition, their outfits, and even their animal motifs surrounding them is great. Chihiro has the goldfish, and Sojo has the Eastern Dragon. In chapter 9, the standoff is shown from a different angle. The foreshortening is visible in the size difference between the swordsmen. It's a beautiful splash page. The next page of action has creative movie-like frame flow. In one panel, the two are shown running out of the building. In the next panel, the camera is in the same place, but it shows the sparks on the floor, indicating that the two have jumped. After some clashes that are too fast for the camera, the two swordsmen are shown in the air with their spirit animals. Both of these poses are amazing. They have curved lines of action, and they are both leaning into the pose. The circular arcs that their animals make complements the poses. Once again, there is foreshortening. Sojo's ice attack has a mini panel of him charging up and a full panel of him launching the attack. Chihiro's flying slash has the attack and then the aftermath when Sojo blocks it, but in the very next panel, there's a wakizashi in Sojo's face, visually conveying how fast and unexpected the attack was. Sojo's reaction being split into two panels slows down the attack and shows how he's processing it. In the next panel, Sojo deflected the blade, but Chihiro was already behind him. This panel is beautiful. The tiles really show off the perspective of the camera. Chihiro's pose is slick, leaning all the way into the pose, crossed arms, flapping coat dragging behind him, and depth as seen in the different shoe sizes. He's also covered in screen tones to show that he's closer to the camera. All three of the swords in the panel have motion blur on them. There are small panels showing Sojo noticing Chihiro before the action panel, where the two clash. Chihiro's attack has a wind-up and impact. The low camera angle is cool, but so is the choreography. Chihiro using a flying slash, wakizashi, and blind spot combo was amazing, but the way Sojo blocks the attacks from the front and back without turning his body is so smooth. After two panels showing reactions, Sojo pushes Chihiro back. This exchange had good frame flow. The panel of Sojo leaning off the edge of the building is wonderful. The perspective is made visible by the buildings and the street in the background. They look so good. I don't know how he drew this camera angle if he didn't use reference. Sojo gets a couple of panels charging up his electric attack before there is a nice one-point perspective shot of the setting from afar. The tones on the building and highlights in the windows show where the light source is. The next big panel of Chihiro tanking the attack looks amazing. There's foreshortening, toning to show who's closer to the camera. The area damage looks great, communicating that it all went to Chihiro, and the backgrounds look great too. The camera is slightly at an angle, meaning that the vanishing point would be way outside the frame, making this a hard angle to draw. After Sojo's charge attack fails, Chihiro is given 4 panels of stumbling before dropping down for a legendary crouch pose. He's leaning in, his coat is dragging, emphasizing the speed. There's a nice rhythm from his right foot to his left. His katana is pointing at the camera, creating depth, and his magical goldfish creates a cool circle around him. In chapter 10, we see the pose from another angle. While it doesn't look as cool, the black wispy energy coming out of him makes up for that. The wide shot of the two looks amazing. The foreshortening isn't as dramatic, but it's still there. The background continues to enhance the artistry of the panel. A small panel of Chihiro's energy indicates that he's moving with his power. When Sojo prepares to block something, there is depth seen in the different sizes of the hand and motion blur. On the next page, the top half of the page's panels are divided by a sound effect. A sword comes at Sojo, and in the next panel, his sword is knocked out of his hand. There's motion blur for both of these actions. There's a spark on the floor, followed by Chihiro's nishiki trail wrapping around the opponent. This is like DBZ's energy trails in the way that they indicate motion through a unique element of the story. Sojo grabs his sword, looks around, and sees Chihiro speeding around. The windup for his next attack is a close-up of his sword swinging. On the next page, half of the page is taken up by the ice attack. This is beautiful. The ice is toned to separate from the characters in the background. The difference in size creates depth. Nishiki's trail can be seen weaving through these. The floor shows the one-point perspective. Sojo's pose is great, with his arm whipping around the other side paired with motion blur, selling the attack. In the next panel, Sojo is in the same pose while Chihiro blindsides him, selling how fast he's moving. The pose looks solid. The way he's covered in black, with the exception of a glowing eye, and his coat fading into energy looks cool. Sojo being closer to the camera makes him larger, creating foreshortening. A mini panel shows Sojo turning around before the next page. The panel right here is phenomenal. The depth is felt through the entire body and blades of the characters. It uses triangle formation, which I covered in another video. The pose of Chihiro is solid and enhanced by depth, but Sojo's is slick. The twist of his body can be felt through how his pelvis points forward, but his chest points to the side, making the pose more dynamic. The pose of the legs adds to the C-curve line of action. The outstretched right arm and leg add personality to the pose. He looks like he's trying out for Sonic Adventure. The way his sword grows as it approaches the camera is beautiful. Aside from the artistic techniques, the idea of Sojo confidently swinging his sword back without turning completely is epic. The Nishiki trail behind the sword is cool, and the motion blur sells the speed of the blades. 2 panels are shown of the blades approaching the faces, then an aftermath panel shows the two sliding past each other. The panel shows that Sojo got cut, and his dialogue says that Chihiro didn't. Once again, spectacular frame flow. The fight technically ends here because it's interrupted. One thing I noticed about Hokazono's art is that he doesn't use speed lines or focus lines in the background. He either draws the background or leaves it white. Using perspective lines on the floor, like with tiles, can make up for that, because that's basically what focus lines are, vanishing points. This is 8 chapters in, and the artist is already drawing phenomenal fight scenes like this. While the story has a lot of room for improvement, the fight scenes are already in the upper echelon of manga fights.